Chapter 20 of Talmic Sojourn in Hong Kong. After the publication of El Filibusterismo, Rizal left Europe for Hong Kong. He lived there for almost a year, from November 1891 to June 1892. On October 18, 1891, Rizal boarded the steamer, which is the Melbourne in Marseilles, bound for Hong Kong. During that voyage, he began his third novel in Tagalog. Makamisa, Dapitan, and other untitled novels were some of the unfinished novels of Rizal. Rizal described his trip as heavenly. Why? Because in the ship, there are 80 passengers, most of them are Europeans, 2 are Spaniards, and only Rizal was the only Asian among them. And some of his fellow passengers are amazed by the knowledge of Rizal in many languages. So when Rizal arrived in Hong Kong last November 20, 1891, he was welcomed by Jose Basa and were also opened his medical clinic. So before the Christmas in 1891, he was glad by the arrival of his father, his brother, and also Sylvester Ubaldo. And not long after that, his mother and sister Lucia, Josefa, and Trinidad also arrived. So this year, or this Christmas, was the most memorable moment in Rizal's life because he had family reunion in Hong Kong. And also, Rizal practiced ophthalmology in Hong Kong, wherein he became a well-known medical practitioner. So in chapter 21, we're in the second homecoming in the Liga Filipina. In May 1892, Rizal made up his mind to return to Manila. He gave 2 letters, which were sealed and inscribed it, "To be opened after my death." That was stated on the letter, and he gave it to his friend Dr. Marquez for safekeeping. At noon at June 26, 1892, Rizal and his sister Lucia arrived in Manila. He stayed in Hotel de Oriente, which was facing the Church of Binondo. On June 27, Rizal boarded again on a train into Tubani Station and visited his friends. And on Wednesday, July 6, he went to Malacanang Palace to resume his series of interviews. The Governor General then presented to him some printed leaflets like Pobres Frailes, which were allegedly found in Lucia's pillowcases. Rizal denied having those leaflets because they were thoroughly searched upon their arrival from Hong Kong and was found clean. Despite his denial and insistent demand for investigation, he was placed under arrest and escorted to Fort Santiago. So on July 15, 1892, Rizal was brought to the steamer in Cebu, which was sailing for Dapitan. And on the 17th of July, Rizal was handed over to Captain Ricardo Carnicero, which is the commandant of Dapitan, and he exiled in Dapitan last July 31, 1896, and with a period of 4 years. And in chapter 22, wherein the exile in Dapitan, Rizal stayed in Dapitan for a period of 4 years. He was supposed to live in Jesuit Church, but he insisted because he wants to live in Captain Carnicero. The two became close and befriended each other. Carnicero was impressed with the fine qualities and personalities of Rizal. On September 21, 1892, Rizal won the Manila Lottery with a sum of 6,200 pesos. He shared his winning to his father and to his friend Basa, and the rest he invested by purchasing agricultural lands. During his stays in Dapitan, he had debates with Father Pastels about religion. They exchanged views and commented each other. In spite of their religious differences, Rizal and Pastel remained good friends. In spite of different belief, they remained good friends, yes. And he also able to meet again his teacher from Ateneo, which is Father Sanchez, and He was assigned by Father Pastel to persuade Rizal to discard his errors of religion. Rizal and Father Sanchez had theological arguments, but all efforts of Sanchez were in vain. Rizal practiced medicine in Dapitan and had many patients. He gave free medicines to the poor. He also operated his mother's right eye. And Rizal also interested in using medical plants instead of other medicines because of some poor patients. He also made a water system for Dapitan, which is modern engineers today found it very marvelous. He also became a teacher, taught young boys in Dapitan. He made beautify projects in their town plaza. Rizal is also a farmer. On his farms, he introduced modern methods of agriculture which he observed in Europe and America. He encourages the farmers in Dapitan to discard the primitive system of tillage and adopt the modern methods. He imported some agricultural machineries from the US. Rizal also had a relationship to Josephine Bracken. They met when he accompanied his father to the clinic of Rizal. Their relationship lasted for 1 month until they decided to marry. The two lived happily in Dapitan. They had son, but only lived for 3 hours. On July 31, 1896, Rizal's exile in Dapitan came to an end. Rizal, together with Josephine, Narcisa, Angelica, and his 3 nephews and 6 pupils, boarded the steamer España. Almost all the Dapitan townies were at the shore and bid him goodbye.
Rizal stopovers from Dapitan to Manila. In Dumaguete, Rizal visited his former classmate Herrero Regidor, who was the judge of the province. He also visited other friends including the Periquet and Rufina families. The España left Dumaguete about 1 o'clock p.m. and reached Cebu the following morning. Rizal was fascinated by the entrance to Cebu, which he considered beautiful. He met an old couple whom he had known in Madrid, and he did operations of his tracheotomy, one in the ears and one to walk. Monday, August 3, Rizal left Cebu going to Iloilo. When they arrived at Iloilo, he went shopping in the city and visited Mulo. Mulo was a church he commented. The church is pretty painted well. The paintings are mostly copies of biblical scenes by Estrada. August 6, 1896, the Spaniard arrived at the Manila Bay early morning. Unfortunately, Rizal was unable to catch the main ship Isla de Luzon because it had departed the previous day at 5 o'clock p.m. August 30, 1896, Rizal was transferred to Spanish cruiser Castilla by order of Governor General Ramos Blanco. He stayed there for a month, pending the availability of a Spain-bound steamer. On the fateful evening of August 18, 1896, the Katipunan plot to overthrow Spanish rule by means of revolution that was discovered by Fray Mariano Gil, Agustinian cura of Tondo. At sunrise August 30, the revolutionists led by Bonifacio and Jacinto attacked San Juan, but they were repulsed with heavy losses. After the Battle of San Juan, Governor General Blanco proclaimed a state of war in the first 8 provinces for rising in arms against Spain. Rizal received 2 letters of introduction for the Minister of War and the Minister of Colonies, with a covering letter which absolved him from all blame for the raging revolution. At 6 o'clock p.m. September 2, Rizal was transferred to the steamer Isla de Panay, which was sailing for Barcelona, Spain, then arrived at Singapore in the evening of September 7, 1896. Rizal and the other passengers went ashore for sightseeing and shopping for souvenirs. In his diary, he wrote that he had observed there are more Chinese merchants and less Indian. Rizal was unaware that since his departure from Manila Bay on his way to Spain, they were exchanging coded telegrams and confidential messages for Rizal's arrest upon reaching Barcelona, and that he was a deportee and was secretly kept under surveillance. Rizal got arrested before reaching Barcelona. September 8, 1 o'clock p.m., the Isla de Panay with Rizal on board left Singapore, unaware of the Spanish duplicity, particularly of Governor General Blanco's infernal deceit. September 25, he saw the steamer Isla de Luzon leaving the Suez Canal crammed with Spanish troops. September 30, he was officially notified by Captain Alemany that he should stay in his cabin until further orders from Manila. he graciously complied with the captain's directive. Arrival in Barcelona as a prisoner. Rizal was confined in his cabin. He was arrested by former Governor General Eulogio Despujol, the man who placed him in exile in the Pitan, now serving as the military commander of Barcelona. He was taken out of the prison by the guards and brought to the headquarters of General Despujol. October 6, 3 o'clock a.m., Rizal was awakened by the guards and escorted to the grim and infamous prison fortress named Montjuic. October 6, 8 o'clock p.m., the ship left Barcelona with Rizal on board as his colon. October 6, 1896, Rizal conscientiously recorded the events in his diary. He was given a good cabin in the second class and although strictly guarded, he was courteously treated by the army officers. On October 8, a friendly officer told Rizal that the Madrid newspapers were full of stories about the bloody revolution in the Philippines and were blaming him for it. The Spanish knew that Rizal was keeping track of the daily events in his diary. They were curious what were recorded in his diary. Suspicion feared what made the diarist is writing. On October 11, before reaching the port side, Rizal's diary was taken away from him. Nothing dangerous was found in the contents of the diary. On November 2, the diary was returned to him. News from Rizal's predicament reached his friends in Europe and Singapore. From London, Dr. Antonio Regidor and Sixto Lopez dispatched frantic telegrams to English lawyer named Hagford. When the colon arrived in Singapore, Attorney Ford instituted proceedings at the Singapore court for the removal of Rizal from the steamer. Rizal was unaware of the attempt made by his friends to rescue him in Singapore. On November 3, the colon reached Manila. While the Spanish community was exulting with joy, Rizal was quietly transferred under heavy guard from the ship to Fort Santiago. Many Filipino patriots were tortured. Pasiano were also tortured. He never signed a statement against Rizal, his left hand crushed by the screw. On November 20, preliminary investigation began. Rizal, the accused, appeared before the judge advocate, Colonel Francisco Olive. He was subjected to a grueling 5-day investigation. Two kinds of evidence were presented against Rizal, namely documentary and testimonial. Documentary evidence consisted of 15 exhibits and testimonial evidence consisted of the oral testimonies. The only right given to Rizal by the Spanish authorities was to choose his defense counsel. Don Luis Taviel de Andrade, first lieutenant of the artillery, chosen to be the defender of Rizal in the court. On December 11, information of charges was formally read to Rizal in his prison cell. December 15, he wrote a manifesto to his people appealing to them to stop the necessary shedding of blood and to achieve their liberties by means of education and industry. Judge Advocate General Nicolas de la Peña recommended Governor General Polavieja that the manifesto be suppressed. The latter heeded the recommendation so that Rizal's manifesto was not issued to the people. Thus, Rizal was saved from the shame of his manifestos being misinterpreted and disobeyed by the Filipinos in arms. December 25, 1896, Rizal, who was accustomed to spend merry season in the company of his beloved family or dear friends, found himself and depressed in a dreary prison cell. The 1896 Christmas was indeed the saddest in Rizal's life. Rizal was in despair and had no idea of what his fate may be. The trial of Rizal was an eloquent proof of his Spanish injustice and misrule. His case was prejudged. He was considered guilty before the actual trial. The military men met not to give him justice, but to accuse and condemn him. Rizal was not given the right to face the witness against him in an open court. December 26, 1896, 8 o'clock a.m., the court-martial of Rizal started in the military building called Cuartel de España. December 28, 1896, the Governor-General Polavieja signed the court's decision and ordered Rizal to be shot at 7 o'clock in the morning of December 30 at Bagumbayan Field, Luneta. Upon Rizal's death, his supposedly retraction letter became one of the most controversial documents in our history. This retraction letter allegedly contains his renunciation of the Masonry and his anti-Catholic religious ideas. December 30, 1896, 3 o'clock a.m., Rizal heard Mass, confessed his sins, and took Holy Communion. 5:30 a.m. he took his last breakfast, after which he wrote his last letters for his family and his brother Pasiano. As the soldiers were getting ready for the death march to Bagumbayan, Rizal wrote his last letter to his beloved parents. At about 6:30 a.m., a trumpet sounded at Fort Santiago, a signal to begin the death march to Bagumbayan. Rizal walked calmly with his defense counsel and two Jesuit priests at his sides. He requested the commander of the firing squad that he be shot facing them. His request was denied, for the captain had implicit orders to shoot him at his back. A Spanish military physician, Dr. Felipe Ruiz Castillo, asked his permission to feel his pulse. He was amazed to find it normal, showing that Jose Rizal was not afraid to die. The death rattles of the drums filled the air. Above the drum beats, the sharp command fire was heard, and the guns of the firing squad barked. It is interesting to note that 14 years before his execution, Rizal predicted that he would die on the December 13th. He was then a medical student in Madrid, Spain. His struggles, sacrifices, and significant contributions to today's independence were held accountable for making Dr. Jose Rizal our national hero. Of course, Rizal himself, his own people, and other few influential foreigners all worked together to make him the greatest hero and martyr of his people. Jose Rizal, considered as the greatest among the Filipino heroes, was not explicitly proclaimed as a national hero. His exceptional dedication and conviction to his life's purpose are beyond the realm of imagination, knowing that he sacrificed his own life, not having the assurance that his sacrifices will be worth it. If he hadn't, and other notable heroes from our history fought for our well-deserved freedom, maybe we'll still be in the hands of our unjust captors. His excellent qualities and merits, Rafael Palma, made him our foremost national hero.
Appendix Mayor of the Students' Manila. After graduating with honor from Ateneo, Rizal went to the University of Santo Tomas to pursue higher studies. His father and brother wanted to pursue higher learning, but Donna Tudor opposed the idea when she knew of what happened to the three martyr priests, Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora. After finishing the first year of course in the philosophy and letter, he transferred to the medical course. Rizal was unhappy in his stay with the university because his Dominican professor were hostile to him. Filipino students were racially discriminated against by the Spaniard, and the method of instructor was obsolete and repressed, unlike in Ateneo. Rizal failed to win his scholastic honor, although in his first year his grades were all excellent. In his grade in his medical studies were not expressed. First, the rejection of spiritual authority of friars. Not all of the priests in the country that time embodied the true spirit of Christ and His church. Most of them were corrupted by worldly desire and used worldly method to effect change and force discipline among the people. Second, the defense of private judgment. Third, qualities Filipino mother needs to possess as evidenced by the portion of this letter. Rizal is greatly concerned of the welfare of the Filipino children and the home they grow up with. Duties and responsibilities of the Filipino mother to their children. Duties and responsibility of wife to her husband. Filipino women are known to be to the women of Malolos was originally written in Tagalog. Rizal gained this writing when he was in London in response to request of Marcelo H. del Pilar. The silent point contained in the letter as follows. Appendix C. To the young women of Malolos. Rizal legacy to Filipino women. is embodied to his famous essay entitled To the Young Woman of Malolos, where he addresses all kinds of women, mothers, wives, the unmarried, and etc., and express everything that he wishes them to in mind. Fifth, duties and responsibilities of a wife to her husband. Filipino women are known to be submissive, tender, and loving. Rizal states in the portion of his letter how Filipino women ought to be a wives in order to preserve the identity of the race. 6. Counsel to young women on their choice of lifetime partner. Rizal message to Filipino women. Jose Rizal was greatly impressed by the fighting spirit that the young woman of Malolos had shown.
The indolence of the Filipinos.
Consumatum est!
La Indonesia de los Filipinos or the indolence of Filipinos. Sa madaling sabi, indolence. Ang tanong, tamad ba ang mga Pilipino? This is the question that Rizal answered in his article, because this article is a sort of defense against the allegations of the Spanish administration that they are saying that the Indios are lazy. The indolence of the Filipinos is study of the causes why the people did not, as was said, work hard during the Spanish regime. Rizal pointed out that long before the coming of the Spaniards, the Filipinos were industrious and hardworking. The Spanish reign brought about a decline in economic activities because of certain causes. The establishment of the galleon trade cut off all previous associations of the Philippines with other countries in Asia and the Middle East. Spain also extinguished the natives' love of work because of the implementation of forced labor. Spain did not protect the people against foreign invaders and pirates. There was a crook system of education if it was to be considered an education. The Spanish rulers were a bad example to despise manual labor. Gambling was established and widely propagated during these times. There was a crook system of religion. Taxes were extremely high, so much so that a huge portion of what they earned went to the government or to the friars. Rizal admitted that the Filipinos did not work so hard because they were wise enough to adjust themselves to the warm, tropical climate. 10 hours work under that burning sun in the midst of pernicious influences springing from nature and activity is equal to a day's labor in a temperate climate. Philippines a century hence.
Of the Philippines rises on the shore of the bay into which the Spaniards sailed in 1570 and where in 1898
The Philippines has 100 years of history. In this article, we shall look back at some of the most important moments in the country's development. The implementation of Spanish military policies greatly affected the Philippine population. It also caused poverty and hunger in the country. The erosion of their indigenous culture was also accelerated by the Spanish colonialists. The Filipinos awakening to the evils of foreign occupation has awakened their collective conscience. They now realize that their society is no longer tolerated by foreigners. The failure to keep the people educated and ignorant had caused the Filipinos to become restless and restless. They would then move towards a change in their way of life. Spain's colonial policies were not designed to stop the country's progress. Instead, they were intended to keep the country's progress in check. strong spirit over the liberty of the country, independence was assured. But for those who are discouraged and disillusioned by sad experiences shall be a prison of the colony forever. For the liberal Spaniards, the ethical condition of the people remained the same. For the friars and their followers, they have progressed. For many Filipino ethics, they have retrograded. The Spanish were able to take hold of the Philippines for 3 centuries because the Filipinos remained faithful during 3 centuries, giving up their liberty and their independence, sometimes thus held by the hope of the paradise promised, sometimes cajoled by the friendship offered them by a noble and generous people.